Thanks everyone for visiting and being here with us today. My name is Nadeem and I'm here with my team, Kathy and Ivan, and we're excited to talk to you about our mobile gaming project. The mobile game industry is currently worth $68.5 billion. And due to its size, it's attracted a lot of investment from the large gaming companies who were referred to as AAA studios. This includes Activision acquiring King Entertainment, which was the maker of Candy Crush, Blizzard launching Hearthstone on mobile devices, and Riot Games, who's known for League of Legends, bringing a version of that to mobile devices this year. A lot of these companies have a lot of resources and they have the knowledge and the money to optimize their games, but a lot of the smaller studios, the independent studios, don't. And so the purpose of this project was to work with Google to create a set of best practices for mobile gaming. And we did this by interviewing some of the largest companies like Activision, PlayStation, and Xbox, as well as through primary research. One of the big topics we discussed was soft launches. Typically, when you launch a game, you only get one opportunity. And if your game isn't optimized, you might lose users and you might lose revenue, and then it's hard to get them back once you've optimized the game. A way to do this is called a soft launch. And so this involves launching your game in a smaller market that still has cultural similarities to your primary market. So something like Canada or the UK, or if you want to go even smaller, Ireland or the Netherlands. And basically by launching in a smaller market, you have the ability to experiment and optimize the game. And then when you finally get the game to where you want it to be, you can launch in your primary market. A lot of studios take this very seriously. So Supercell, which makes Clash of Clans, will actually cancel games in the soft launch phase if they don't hit certain metrics and KPIs. And their perspective is they would rather not invest the time and money in a game that's going to earn a suboptimal ROI, and they would rather take that money and invest it in creating a different game. Another concept that came up over and over again was measuring your ROI on marketing. And the method that they use for this is called cohort analysis. Cohort analysis is just simply creating cohorts out of users you acquire on a specific channel or a specific day. So a group of users that's acquired on Facebook on a certain day is called a cohort, and a group of users acquired via Google on a certain day is called a cohort. You can use cohorts for A/B testing, so you can test different cohorts across channels to figure out whether YouTube or Google or Facebook or Instagram are more effective for your particular game. And you can also test campaigns. So testing different artwork, different text, different copy, different campaigns. Choosing the right monetization metric to track is kind of where the art is here. And this will depend on the size of your game. So some games with high retention, which are more casual, those games tend to use ARPU, average revenue per user. Some games that target a more hardcore audience and have lower retention will use something like average revenue per daily active user. So really the metric you use will depend on the size of your game and the type of user you have.
When gaming companies think about marketing and creative assets, they have a choice in forming an in-house creative team or working with an outside agency to produce their marketing and creative assets. The main benefit of an in-house creative team is that this team will fully understand your brand and product, so anything they create will be true to your brand image. Additionally, communication and collaboration with other teams will be faster and easier since employees will have worked with each other before. On the other hand, working with a third party offers flexibility and less fixed costs for the company, since you can ramp up and down usage depending on the volume of work. Additionally, these outside teams of experts offer a fresh perspective and can bring new ideas to the table. Our recommendation is a hybrid approach, which consists of a smaller core in-house team that can be supplemented by an outside agency when the volume of work or the pace of work is higher than usual. Influencer marketing is a new form of social media marketing that helps brands quickly build trust with their target audience. They leverage the existing trust that consumers have in social media influencers. Influencer marketing is especially useful in reaching Millennial and Generation Z consumers who are harder to reach through traditional marketing methods due to low interaction rates and the rise in ad blocking. When working with influencers, there are a few different ways to partner with them, including sponsored media posts, hosting events, and collaborating on product development. It's important to note that influencer marketing is typically not used to drive direct sales, since influencers help tell a story of a brand and explain how that brand fits into their lifestyle. So it's a longer-term investment in brand image and helps to create a brand voice. And that's also why measuring ROI on influencer marketing can be quite difficult.
Intellectual property, or IP, is essentially the brand of a game. So Call of Duty is an IP, World of Warcraft is an IP. You can create your own IP, which takes a lot of time and money, or you can license IP from a third party. So for example, if you want to make a game with the Star Wars IP, you can license that from Disney. There are three primary ways to license IP. The first one is a revenue or a profit share. This involves splitting revenues or profits with the IP holder. As you can imagine, a revenue share is less favorable for a developer because the split happens before you can take expenses into account, whereas a profit share is more favorable for a developer. A minimum guarantee is essentially a guarantee to the IP holder that they'll make a certain amount of money within, say, a year. So you tell Disney, for example, we guarantee you $5 million for a year if we can use your Star Wars IP. Then at the end of the year, if they don't make $5 million, you can pay them the difference. So it's essentially a back-ended payment. An advance is similar, but it's an upfront payment. So you pay the $5 million upfront for the right to use the IP in your future games. There is no real best practice here. The version of, or the type of structure that you use will depend on the size of the developer, the size of the holder, the popularity of the IP, the type of game you're making. So this will usually be a bit of a negotiation, but these are the three primary types of deal structures.
We talk a little bit about how to spend money. Now we're going to talk more about how to earn money. And AAA gaming is actually an industry where you have to use multiple business models. And we're going to explore in this slide that some of the games actually use about like 6 business models. You may know a lot about like buy-to-play business model, free-to-play, DLCs, pure subscription. However, there are 2 business models which are more unique to the new games and are trending. The first one is a season pass. The season pass is more like a continuation of DLC business model, where you actually acquire additional content for a game in advance. So a gamer pays in advance to the studio gets money to develop this content, and in return, the gamer receives a discount for the future updates. The battle pass is more continuation of the in-app purchase. You have a tier of their different items available to you, and you get to the next level as much as you play. So the more you play, the further you get into this tier list, and you get access to the different weapons, skins, in-game items. So it really drives their retention of the gamer, so it pushes you to play more. The next slide is about the subscription platforms. Subscription platforms is a relatively new addition to the gaming. And their recent survey of Deloitte showed up that 30% of US consumers actually pay for a game subscription service. Most of them are in console platforms where you have 2 dominant players, Xbox and PlayStation. They were able to establish a good relationship with their other gaming studios and introduce into those platforms subscription business models. So you have a bundle of games and you subscribe and you have access. It's a great way to try new games or play the games you like. On the PC platforms, there are 2 largest gaming studios such as EA and Ubisoft. They launched their own platforms which allow to play their titles. However, it's not working great if you are a smaller studio, you don't have enough catalog of games, and players don't usually play many games during the year. The new addition to the subscription platforms are mobile. Apple and Google recently launched those platforms in 2019, and however, they haven't had any significant traction on them. Some users show a very positive feedback that they really like the opportunity to play their games without actually using their in-app purchase, which sometimes take a ridiculous amount of money from them. So they really like these platforms. We talked a little bit about those platforms. We're now going to talk more about the development costs and revenue. So development costs grew about 10x for the last 10 years. It's really huge. And there are three reasons why that happened. The first one is development teams have gone massive. And you have about 200, 300 people are working on the new big title for all those AAA studios, because you need to have actors, you need to have art designers, you have a bunch of new professionals involved to create a new game. Also, players demand high quality graphics. You have to create those new textures, you have to add new 3D models in order to game looks great. And it takes a lot of time and it takes lots of resources. And finally, there's a point about expectations. Nowadays, gamers learn about new games really quick through the influencers, through the streamers. They learn what is the quality of the game. So if you have to create a great game, otherwise your game going to be destroyed by their public opinion of those influencers. There are also several ways how to reduce costs. So game developers were able to reduce costs by 6 times to create the same amount of content. So the first one is access to high quality universal engines. It drives the development down, the time you spend to create this engine. Another way is you can subsidize your game with the early access. So you allow gamers to pay for a game in advance, and they have early access to this game and have you to optimize your game. And finally, you have marketing tools which became more affordable, which we discussed in the previous slides. The next slide is about drivers of the lifetime value of gamers. And there are 4 main categories. A strong community is a must. You have to have a strong community in order to drive retention, and retention drives revenue. User-created content is a great way how you can include gamer in the game development. It used to be mostly focused on game modifications, but nowadays gamers can create art in the game, basically create weapon skins, maps, and it extends the amount of content in the game, which also drive the retention. Player games can also introduce a multiplayer design or leaderboards in order to create a competition in the game. It really drives retention because people actually create any content when they're playing against each other. You don't need to develop a new storyline, but if you're allowed to play gamers against each other, they will be really engaged with that. And final piece is about systematic content. So you can't create a game and just sell it as is. You have to develop a new content, new ideas, new features into the game. Sometimes it really works great with the season battle passes. So you can introduce new features, new weapons, new maps every quarter, and you get additional money from gamers and you help them to get new value from the game. Thank you so much for your attention. We are looking forward for your questions.
Great, thank you everybody. First, must compliment your Zoom backgrounds. Looking really great, so nice work there. We do have a hand up from Chris. Chris, go ahead and get us started on questions, please.
Sorry, I had a group me trouble. So I just had a question about expectations. I've got the latest Call of Duty Modern Warfare game, and I'm pretty sure on day 1 there was like a 25 gig update to a 40 or 50 gig game. Do you think the market pressure of trying to have blockbuster games come to market so early, do you think that is really kind of putting the screws to developers in terms of making quality products? Because it seems like you just expect there's going to be bugs in a brand new game these days.
I think that's probably, that's true. I think it's probably more true in the console market than in the mobile market. The mobile games tend to be smaller. They tend to have fewer mechanics. There are some bigger games on mobile, like Call of Duty obviously has a mobile version. But I think mobile games tend to be pretty well optimized because they're a lot smaller in scope. And so, you know, you're also not going to be downloading 25 gigabyte updates over, 4G. And so I think they need to keep those games smaller.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and go to Patrick, please.
Yeah, I'm curious about the introduction of kind of newer techniques of software development in general into the kind of mobile gaming. So, you know, traditionally a lot of the AAA console games were very much a waterfall kind of product, and mobile is much more of an agile kind of, or even moving past agile kind of into more of a ongoing management DevOps kind of world. Like, how are studios adapting? I mean, when you take a AAA game and adapt it to mobile, are they able to kind of match through that? It gets, I guess, a little bit to Chris's question as well, a little bit deeper on that. But you know, how are studios thinking about that? How is Google thinking about that as well, as they kind of migrate the development models? Where those kind of like difficulties have been?
All right, just so your question is, how do they think about taking their AAA games and bringing them over to mobile?
Yeah, and sort of are the game, you know, there are kind of AAA kind of game developers, right? And then there are mobile game developers, and increasingly there's a lot of overlap between the two, right? Whether it's AAA games coming to mobile, or it's mobile, you know, mobile game studios trying to build larger kind of ongoing, you know, larger productions. Are you seeing trends? You know, did you find any evidence that, you know, one way is a little bit easier, or that there are lessons learned for companies beyond some of the kind of marketing and cost-driven trends?
I mean, from what we've seen, when you can't just take a AAA game and port it to mobile, you have to change it pretty significantly. So like, there's a Mario game on mobile, but it's more of like a tapping game, right? You can't have the same complicated gameplay and levels and all that kind of thing that you can have on a Switch. So, you know, mobile is big, but I think what companies are doing is they're basically distilling the game down to like the mechanics or the features that could work on a mobile screen or on a tablet, and then doing that. And it tends to be very, very simplistic compared to the base game.
Okay, I'm just curious, kind of, if you think about cloud video gaming kind of networks trying to come in, where it's play on any device, right? It's the same kind of game. That was sort of the next iteration of kind of this middle ground where it's device agnostic, and Google obviously with Stadia was trying to move away from a console as being a significant part of that strategy and approach to like break the hold that consoles have on a lot of games by moving to cloud, and thinking through like ahead at cloud gaming, will it be a little bit more like mobile gaming, or will it be a little bit more like AAA kind of gaming, or is it its own thing and it's unique?
I would just like to add to that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. I mean, we saw definitely like there's some Agile introduced more into the content, because as we previously mentioned, you constantly develop and test new ideas about like which gaming mode works better. And instead of just like you develop the game and that's it, you constantly listen to the feedback from users, constantly test different ideas, A/B test, and you can actually test different features in different markets. The similar idea with soft launch, and then introduce to their entire gaming community. So there are lots of things introduced around the content, but not as much around their game engine, for example, because it's usually really predefined and you just play with this engine introducing the content.
And I'd say on the streaming, right now it's just taking the existing AAA games and you can stream them to your mobile device, which is not super convenient because you still need to find a controller and hook it up. And then you're playing a game that was designed for a 50-inch TV on your 5-inch phone. So it's a good question. I don't know what the right solution to that is. My guess is you're going to have to adapt games to the mobile devices more so than doing what you currently do on TV.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you just fine, Alba. Thanks.
Oh, great. Like a lot of what you mentioned is more general, like understanding influencer marketing, understanding IP. When you think about this industry, what's really specific that you've got to understand to compete in this industry? And what's the biggest change that's going to pivot or at an inflection point, if it goes one way or the other, that's going to impact companies being successful in this area?
I think the most mobile games are free, right? And so I think that's the biggest difference is you're not paying $60 to buy a mobile game, whereas on PC and on console you are. And so more so than any other type of gaming, you actually you have product managers and you have PMMs and you have all of like a mobile game developer looks a lot more like a tech company than a game development company that focuses on console. And so the people we were talking to were saying how they hire a ton of product managers and they hire all these analytics folks. And it's all about kind of optimizing like 1% more acquisition and 1% more retention and 1% less churn. And all those things like have millions and millions of dollars of impact. So that's really kind of the big difference that we've seen in our conversations.
Feel free, we got some time. So if anybody has any last questions, I'll speak while we wait for some other hands, but I know, Nadeem, Ivan, and Kathy, you all came into this project as avid gamers, both with your own, everybody had their own games and consoles or systems of choice. What were the biggest takeaways that you learned in the course of your research for this project with Google?
I can start. I mean, for me, it was really the fact of what I just mentioned, which is that mobile game companies are really a lot more focused on optimizing sort of minor metrics than big companies. It was interesting talking to all of those big companies because different companies have different levels of kind of involvement with their studios. When we spoke to Electronic Arts, we spoke to a guy in their strategy team. And we were like, okay, so how does a studio decide what kind of monetization to put in their game? He's like, oh, I don't know. Like they basically experiment with that. And we're like, okay, so how do you decide which markets to go into? And he's like, oh, I don't know. The studios decide that. And we came out of that conversation being like, do you do anything? Like, do you know anything about your studios? Whereas when we spoke to like the Blizzard folks, they knew everything about everything, right? Like they had this down to a science. So different studios and companies put a lot more importance on their mobile games. And that was kind of interesting for me to see.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to learn about like stage gating for IP and how they have multiple stages of testing how successful a game will be before actually getting to a final launch. And same thing with like soft launches. It's really smart to launch in a smaller market before going to your like actual target market. Professor Taylor, were you going to say something?
Sorry, I'm outside. I was just going to ask a question about when you presented this to Google and when you talked to the Google people, like what's been their biggest surprise? Or if you haven't, what do you anticipate being their biggest surprise?
Maybe Ivan can talk about this, but they didn't seem to really know a lot of. So the first half of our presentation was about marketing and the second half was business model and strategy. And they knew a lot about the first half and not a lot about the second half. And so a lot of the stuff that Ivan was talking about was kind of new to them. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I would add to that they really maybe more focused on mobile and similar to Nadeem previously said about they look at their games and game developers more as like another just type of applications where they apply similar metrics about like retention, acquisitions. While in AAA games, you see that there's a huge, you need to understand better about different types of gamers. You need to understand more about how to create a content, how to engage players to actually play the same game for a year or maybe even more. While in mobile space, you usually play the game maybe like a month, and then you switch to another one. So you are not constantly getting the same game again and again. While in AAA, you have to think about business models, how to acquire new players, how to keep players. Like World of Warcraft have been doing their game for more than 10 years, and there are still millions of people play this game.
Does anybody have any questions? We've got room for one more, I think. All right. Well, you guys have answered everybody's questions, so that's a sign of a good presentation, I think. But no, this is really, really interesting material, really great research and presentation here. I know that you all have worked really hard, especially going back and forth with not just Google, but all the other gaming companies you worked with. So I know all of us at the Center for Digital Strategies and at Tuck are really excited for you all to be able to take this work and present it to Google, hopefully sooner rather than later, and get their feedback as well. So great job, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for participating in today's presentation.